If you were to ask me what's impacting the market right now, I would say the catalyst obviously was COVID. We're still trying to bounce back from COVID, but even before COVID, you could look at a number of things on what changed within the gas industry. There were three things basically. So the amount of production increased drastically a couple years before COVID, which led to number two, which is price inelasticity. And number three, while the industry has gotten so much bigger over the past 10 years, let's say, the storage capacity hasn't increased at all. So if we take these kind of one by one, in 2018 alone, the production increased from 75 billion cubic feet a day to 88 billion cubic feet a day. So that's a 13 BCF a day increase. If you look at that same time frame, right around a 2-year period, we went from 72 billion cubic feet a day to 92 billion cubic feet a day, which is slightly less than a 30% increase in the size of the market. And you look at what happened to producers? Well, the producers really shot themselves in the foot because the prices really started to plummet. With that decrease in price, producers started to default on their loans. They went into bankruptcy. Their acreage was sold to either large independents or publicly traded companies, and their decision-making processes became much more centralized than decentralized. And that's kind of an important piece here, because customers that ended up, or the producers that went bankrupt, were smaller independents. And these small independent companies can really respond in a much quicker fashion than the publicly traded companies can at that point. And I think it's fair to say that during that period, the motto "drill, baby, drill" didn't work for producers at all. Many of them just kind of drilled themselves out of business. What also happened during that same time period is, because the prices were so low, you have to be in search for, the commodity had to be in search for demand. So LNG processing facilities were built a little bit quicker. Exports to Mexico, the pipelines were built a little bit quicker. But eventually the low prices caused natural gas generation for the power industry to increase rapidly at the expense of coal. From 2010 to 2020, the amount of coal generation was virtually cut in half. And that's an important factor, because when the coal generation gets cut in half, there's no price elasticity. And if the price of gas wants to go up, coal then isn't coming in to take its place in the generation stack. And you end up with the situation where the generation stack just takes gas, and it just doesn't matter what the price is at any point in time. It'll just take the gas. And thirdly, that the storage capacity really hasn't increased in the past 10 years. So what many people don't know is that the U.S. is by far and away the largest producer of natural gas in the world. In the U.S., natural gas is a huge business, and in the past 10 years, we've gone from roughly a market that was 24 trillion cubic feet annually to 35 trillion cubic feet annually, which is roughly a 50% increase. And over that same amount of time, the storage capacity really hasn't increased at all. It's been around 4.5 trillion cubic feet. So all these factors were going into place before COVID. And then once COVID hit, there were all sorts of problems with not just natural gas, but with anything. The energy demand across the globe just plummets. Oil prices traded negative, and they actually even settled negative on the day, which is just really shouldn't happen. Natural gas trades negative in some basins. And at a point in time when the U.S. was trying to figure out what to do with all this extra gas that hit the market because of COVID, the rest of the world was pushing back its natural gas back into the U.S. from the LNG exports. And now the U.S. has to find what else to do with 6 billion cubic feet a day. And at that point, the price just has to go down, which is not good for producers, again. So the producers that did make it through 2018, 2019, 2020 now have this kind of new shot in the foot, which is, how do I survive? You know, the ones that were teetering are now gone. The workers that they had back in, during COVID, they had to let go. There was all sorts of cost cutting that was taking place. And again, that just made the whole industry much more centralized, which just leads to even slower reactions to price movements. You can also look at the new administration since 2020. They haven't been the friendliest to the oil and gas industry. Energy assets, specifically pipelines, have not been built, and it's tough to grow an industry when you can't get rid of the product. So what ends up happening is you're fully utilizing all the older infrastructure that you have, and that infrastructure just breaks down a lot more than it used to for a variety of reasons. So what's causing all the volatility in the natural gas market? There are a ton of factors that come into play. We had a large increase in the industry itself. The industry itself in the past 10 years has increased over 50%, which has led to some really weird changes with the market. We've seen prices that have become much more inelastic, meaning natural gas is being taken by a number of different industries that include LNG, exports to Mexico, the power industry, that will take natural gas at whatever price natural gas needs to trade at. And also because of the industry increasing by 50%, at a time when storage has not increased, we're seeing a lot less hiding places for natural gas. And another big reason is the fact that natural gas is becoming a global commodity, and it's just not regionalized. 10 years ago, natural gas was a North American commodity, and today it's a global commodity. And we don't have to just worry about what's the weather in the United States this year. We have to worry about what's the weather across the world. What's the weather in Europe? What's the weather in Asia? How much are these different sectors taking LNG at this point? And there's just a lot more volatility than there used to be.